Hello everyone, it's Natasha from Treasure Books. So today I'm going to show you how I use tea bags left over from my tea dyeing and how I vintage up magazine photos. So I'll show you some examples first. You can see here this was the original picture, and that's what it looked like once I vintaged it up with the tea bags. So these are some of the examples. I'll show you some of the examples just so you can have your brain ticking as we're going along. I've got the steps here. We'll go through that. So these are just some of the images that I took out of standard magazines and vintaged them up. So that's those. Now let's see, there's a few others here. I also wanted to, we'll come back to this one. Other things you can use is I've used my atlas maps, so they look really cool. I love this one, like pockets and stuff in journals, travel journals especially. So we can do that with maps. I also did some playing cards, vintaging them up. And I also have a book of quotes, this one, and you can find this sort of thing in, second-hand shops and stuff like that. So I ripped pages out and they look so good, vintaged up like this. They look really good. So they can just be used to embellish journals and stuff like that. If you're thinking you could just, tea dye, it's not quite the same because this has spots and marks and textures like these little folds, which we will go through when we're making some together. And, if you're thinking you could just go on Pinterest and print out vintage photos and stuff like that, you could definitely do that. You could also go and buy a journal from Target for $3. So that's not what it's about. It's about having fun and creating stuff and reusing, recycling, that sort of thing. That's my jam. Okay, so let's begin. These are the steps. I'll just move this. I had the white surface so that you can actually see some of the examples I was showing you. Okay, so first things first. After you've finished tea dyeing your papers, you are left with these bags, tea bags, which we usually throw out. I actually have been keeping them for a while, and I've used them in different projects, but I just came up with this idea recently. So, okay, this is what I do. I keep quite a few, like I've had them going for a little while. So when you're doing a typical tea dye session, I generally use about 12 tea bags or something like that. I don't really count. So, you want to have a few on hand before you start doing this project. All of our tea bags are going to be different sizes and shapes and stuff like that. But these are just the ones that I happen to have. So you take out this stuff. Now I know that's good for your garden and stuff like that. I'm just going to put it aside. I don't have, a garden. So, but yeah, even that can be reused. Okay, and you're left with this sort of thing. Now, you will find, I'll just put this batch of tea dyeing paper that I did is quite dark, but then you will find all of them will be a little bit different. So see how this one's all scrunched up, because when I took it out of the mixture, I squeezed all the water out, and that's what that looks at. Whereas this one, when I took it out of the mixture, I just kind of squeezed it flat rather than scrunched it up. So you will have all sorts of different textures, and that comes in handy when we're choosing what to put over what image. So you have your tea bags. The next thing you need to do is select images. Now I'm quickly going to just quickly explain. I don't know if you can read this. It says choose images that can be vintagey. I don't even know if that's a word, but let's take for example this. So this girl, to me, because of the big lips and the thick eyebrows, she looks very 2019. She looks very modern. So no matter how much vintaging up we do with this face, it will just not come across as vintage. So that's the sort of thing that I'm looking for. I wouldn't use this image, for example. Now, next image, this one, you can see very modern looking, you know, this crazy hairstyle and colors and everything. It just wouldn't work for a vintage photo, right? So when choosing images, I mean, this one definitely I could work with. I think we could make this image look vintage, because once we cut everything else off, and you know, we can even darken her face a little with some inking, I reckon she can pass off as a vintage, you know, 100-year-old photo. But usually when choosing images, I will go for really neutral kind of something that, you know, I'll look at and I think, oh yeah, you know, once only this area is left and it looks really aged, I think that could look vintagey, right? Even this one, I think, you know, it's neutral, so you could do something with it to make it vintagey. Even this one, but not so much because of the smile and the, I don't know, but we could work with that one. So, all right, so now I'm actually going to show you what I do. So the next thing is you will choose your image. So I'm going to go with one of these images that I showed you here. Let's do this image. So you will choose your image and then you will choose your tea bags. So I say here, think about placement. So let's take, for example, this tea bag here. So you can see that it's got a lot of dark. So once you put this on, all of this dark here is going to cover her face. It doesn't matter if you're using a map, that's fine. But if you're using something like a face, you don't want to have chunks of color right on top of the face. So, for example, for this image, perhaps I would use something like this. So there's just a little bit of darkness here, and as I place the image, I don't want that little bit of darkness right across her face or on her nose and stuff like that. It doesn't matter if it's on the side of her face, but you don't want it right in the middle. So when I'm choosing my placement, I would probably think about putting the dark like underneath, just underneath the face. So I'll just show you an example. See this one here? It looks like a pig face because I just put it on and I didn't realize that that dark spot is right on top of her face. So that's the sort of thing I'm trying to avoid. All right, so the next thing you need is a brush and you need PVA glue. Now I mix my PVA glue with just a little bit of water, so I'll show you if you can see the consistency. That's the sort of, it's not runny, but it's still dripping. I know it's hard to see. That's the sort of consistency, but you probably know how, you know, what you prefer and stuff like that. So okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm just going to cover this just for a second because I want to be able to put my brush down. I'm using a brush. It's just quite a thick brush. It's not a really soft one. So what I do is I just plop some glue right on top of the image, just like this. Now, the good thing about using tea bags is, okay, so I'm just going to think about where I'm going to put it right under her face like this. And then I just kind of make sure that it's sort of down. Now, I like some folds, so I'll do some folds. I'm going to go, and also when you're doing the folds, take into consideration what's happening on the face. So I'll show you here. See this huge fold right there? It's going right across her mouth and it's quite big. So I try to avoid that. And the good thing with using the tea bags rather than tissue paper and napkin, because they were designed to stay intact somewhat to a degree in water, as you're applying your glues and water and stuff, they don't rip as much as, say, for example, a tissue would or a napkin. So that's definitely a plus. So I just plop some glue down. You know, I'm not being too precious with what I'm doing over here. If you make a mistake, like I said, it's quite forgiving. So you can see this fold here, it's right in the middle of her face. So I might just straighten this up a little bit. This isn't something that, I'm just doing this to show you how you can fix mistakes. That's all. Okay, so I've got some folds happening. I'm overdoing it now, I know, but that's it. Just making sure that it's completely glued down. You probably don't need this much glue. I probably went a little bit overboard. But that's it. That's done. So I'm just going to move this away so it's not in my way. Once that's done, you wait for it to dry, obviously. I didn't bother drying it myself. I just wait for it to dry. So I'm going to put this aside. I will come back and actually finish this one off on camera so that you can see how it looks. I don't even know how it's going to look, so I hope it looks good. But while that's drying, I'm just going to show you some of the ones that I've already done that have dried. And okay, let's have a look. Let's do this one. So the next thing we do is rip the edges. So I hope I'm going to be able to, because there's that second girl in the photo which I don't want. So I'm just ripping this here. I don't want to cut into her head too much. Rip down. So you can see this person here. I don't like it. So I'm just going to do this. Okay. So we've done that. Next thing we do is ink the edges. Let me just get my thing. So I'm using this distress oxide. So I'm just going to see these white, as I was ripping, because I was ripping towards myself. You've got the white border. If you're ripping from this side, the white border would be on the other side. So I actually like this white thing around, and then I would ink it. But even though you ink it, you can still see it, and especially if you curl it up a bit, it gives it an even more aged appearance. So ink, ink, ink. Now let's have a look against the white background, and that's my vintaged up photograph. So then if I feel like it, I can just add a bit of, you know, if I feel, oh, it needs to be more vintage, oh, her face is too white, I can go over her face a bit more, you know, just play around. And that's it. That's my vintage photo. Okay, another thing, I'm not going to do these ones. So like, for example, this one, look how good this one looks. I found this photo picture in a magazine. So for like, imagine for a travel journal. So you can look at things like that, you know. You can stamp on top, like I could, I don't know, stamp Bon Voyage or something like that on this one. So it doesn't necessarily have to be faces. It can be whatever you want it to be. It can be book. What else did I use? Oh, I used pictures from like nature books, like roses and stuff like that. So you can see that one looks pretty cool. Okay. So there's this one, there's this one. See what I mean? Like, you can really just have a play. Okay, and I'm just going to show you this map so you can see the colors are really bright. I glued my thing down. You can use gesso if you want, if you need to mute the colors even more before you stick your paper bag, your tea bags down. Personally, wouldn't bother because it just takes a lot longer. Let's vintage this baby up. Distress, distress, distress. Okay. And then, you know, as things are aging, they start darkening from the outside in. You know, when you've got old books and they're yellowed on the edges. So that's what I'm trying to achieve here. Okay. And here's my vintage map. All right. So that's that. Just one thing that I wanted to add, and then I'm going to quickly come back once this image is dry, just because we've done it together. I want to actually show you once it's dry how it's going to end up looking, just so you see. So before I stop the video and then come back again, I just wanted to mention, if you guys are wondering, and I know this is a really confusing topic, if you're wondering about copyright issues of using magazine pictures, especially current magazine pictures, so you absolutely can use images from books or book pages and stuff like that in your journal. What you cannot do is vintage these images up like I've done and then scan them, for example, and then sell them. So even if you just scan one and sell it in a journal, that's illegal because you have now reproduced this image and copied this image. Does that make sense? So you absolutely can use the original thing that you've got in your hand, but you cannot reproduce it. So that's just a quick note. I know that other people have spoken about it. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Nick the Booksmith's video. I think it was in her free course that she has on Teachable, and she actually talks about that. And also Lindsay Zanor, she talks about that in her she has actually a specific video about this specific thing, because I used to be really confused about it, and I know a lot of people are, and they worry about using images in journals that they sell. So you're definitely fine. The only thing that everybody recommends that you stay away from completely is Disney stuff. So that's the only thing I wouldn't touch. I would not touch that. Okay, so that's very brief and very quick thing about the copyright issues. I will come back in a moment and show you the finished product, the finished vintage lady. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So she's dry. I'm just gonna do what I've done before. I'm just gonna rip, try and get it a little bit interesting. Rip around. Okay, so next thing I do is inking the edges. Ink. So, and as you will see, what I would have done differently with this image, for example, is, can you see this fold here? It would have been nice to have some more small folds around her face, but I think this still looks good. But I think maybe we can vintage up her face just a little bit more, just to look a bit more old, I guess. So I'm just gonna add, I'm not being too precious here, just instinctively adding some more color. And I think this looks good. Okay, and that's it. Let me know what you think. Ask me any questions if you have questions about the copyright. So in terms of the copyright, one more thing I wanted to say is you know, just use common sense, I guess. I wouldn't make a full journal with just images from magazines. Say, for example, I make a journal and I have two or three, or I just have one in there. It's no big deal. I would stay away from famous people just because, first of all, it doesn't go, I guess, with the vintage theme to have Beyonce in your journal looking vintage. So that's just, and perhaps I wouldn't use Beyonce because of the copyright issues, I guess. So yes, if you have any questions, I will try to find that video I was talking about. I'm not sure if I can link Nick the Booksmith's video, because it's actually in one of her free courses on her teachables. But I will see if I can find the video that I watched from Lindsay Zenor, and I will try and link them down below so you can, if you have questions about the copyright. I know that I used to get really disheartened because I thought, well, I've got all of these books that I bought and now I can't use them because of copyright. They're not, you know, 70, 80 years old or whatever they have to be. So yes, I'm pretty confident now that I can use book pages and things like that in my journals that I sell. So yes, I will link that down below. Let me know what you think about the project, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.